Hi, this week's blog is covering a couple of matches actually. The first match is a Fishermania qualifier at Baldings Pools. I quite like Baldings as a fishery. Lots of small pools. They're not particularly shallow. They're sort of like up to 8 feet deep. I'm sure there's probably a few deeper pools, but the ones I've been on have been 8 feet deep. And they're full of fish. Loads of fish in them. Carp, F1s, good sized fish as well. Not not lots of small fish. So you can get some quality days fishing. When there's a lot of pegs on, makes it a little bit more tricky because the pools are quite small. The fish know that there's a lot of people fishing, and you really need to draw on a point or somewhere with a bit of space to get the best of your pegs. The peg I drew is a good example. I drew, I've got to try and remember the number now, 25 on Sycamore. Peg 24 on the Thursday match 2 days previous had 154 pound in the edge and short and a few fish shallow, and I thought, fantastic, this might be my chance. Might be a chance to have a good day's fishing and possibly get in the frame and even win it. I started the match short. I had a skimmer about a pound within 10 seconds. Fantastic start. I then proceeded to sit for 2 hours, and then I had a carp. I went for a wander, saw a few people on the few points catching some fish, and then I had another carp late on. That was the end of my day. The chap next to me had a carp with about 20 minutes to go, and the other guy on my left had a skimmer. So as you can see, it was a very, very poor area. There was just few too many of us in the bowl, really. It's a real shame because it's a stunning place, really, really scenic, and a lovely place to go fishing. So it's just a shame that the conditions probably weren't quite right, and with a lot of anglers there, it wasn't quite quite the one really. But Perry Stone won the match. Perry is a guy I've got quite a lot of respect for actually, because he commits himself to these big events. In terms of, when I say big events, Fishermania and Match This, those sort of individual events, you've got to be prepared to travel, put your name down for your tickets. I applied for about 7 or 8 this year, and I got 3 tickets, one of which I've had to give back because it's clashed with something else in the end. But people like Perry, they apply for all of them, and if they get 7 or 8, they get a chance to go and qualify. He had a good peg with some weed there, and I watched him up his gear to strong elastic, and he managed, they're only pound and a half F1s, but because he's fishing with such strong elastic, he managed to get him away from the weed quickly. He was telling me that a light elastic early on cost him a few fish, and he thought it might cost him, but he's made that change, and it's made him win the Fishermania qualifier with 112 pound. It's that sort of angling that wins qualifiers. Making those changes is what wins, because if you don't adjust and if you don't fish with the right tackle for the peg, it could have quite easily persevered with what you would think is F1 tackle, light hooks, light lines and everything else, and weighed 60 pound, having complained it lost 60 pound and cost himself a place in qualifying. So well done to him. I know he was in the final last year, so to qualify for an event like that 2 years running is a real achievement, so well done to him. Obviously a bit disappointed. I've sort of had, I was disappointed really that these big matches, I was really hoping, when you get so many anglers on these venues, often they don't fish as well as you think that they might. So I was quite disappointed. But this week I went to Decoy Lakes for a Maver Match This. Another sellout, 130 peg sellout. Fantastic the way that competition's taken off, and that there's lots of people going, whoops, dropped the line. Lots of people going and travelling, and it really does make for people who want to pursue these sort of bigger competitions. It makes things really good, and really it gives people a chance to fish big matches that fish well. Now Decoy is one that I always like to apply for, even though it's a couple of hours from my house. It's fantastic fishing. Now, even though it was a very, very cold easterly wind this weekend, temperatures were, well, there was a frost in the morning. I would say that most fisheries would pretty much shut up shop, and it would be really, really poor fishing. Decoy delivered, not for everybody. You certainly had to get on a peg, but generally speaking, there was a few bites for a lot of people. The lake I was on, Beastie, has to be one of the best commercial lakes in the country. There's 30 pegs on the lake. They only ever really peg sort of 25 of them, but it's a big lake. So for 25 anglers on a big lake, it can take it, and it fishes well. So even in the conditions, I think there was 6 weights over £100 on my lake, which for me is good fishing. I drew peg 26, which is quite spooky really, because I'd been there in the week having a coaching day, and the local guy said to me, oh, 26 on Beastie will be a great draw because it's full of barbel. Once those barbel show up, it often wins the match consistently for 4 or 5 weeks. So I thought, God, I'd love to draw that peg. Spoke to a good friend of mine, Andy Leathers, and he said that, you know, if you draw that peg, really it's all over if those barbel are there. So I could not believe it when I opened the envelope and Beastie 26 was in my hand. Something that hasn't happened to me too often recently, and I was absolutely over the moon. I thought, great, you know, a chance to just catch these barbel, and hopefully I'll have a chance of winning the match, or certainly framing. When you plumb up the peg, there's a set of reeds and an island bang in front of you. Just off to one side is like a shallow plateau. I say shallow, I mean mainly the lake's like 6 foot deep, but this plateau is sort of 4 foot deep for about, I would have said, a metre, metre and a half, and then it comes quite steeply up into shallow water against these tree roots that have all been cut, but there's a lot under the water. The other side of these tree roots is back into the main depth 6 feet. So for me, there was 3 areas of the peg I needed to target. This plateau, let's hope the barbel, when the barbel are there, apparently this plateau is where they are. It's quite a gravelly plateau and you can catch them really well. So I thought that's got to be my sort of starting place. The deep water to the right, the wind was sort of coming this way as I sat on my box. The wind was coming this way, which meant that the deeper water to the right was actually a little bit sheltered, and I fancied that more for the barbel to hang out. The problem was I could just feel with my heavy plummet when I was plumbing around, the bottom was quite soft there, and I thought I should think they're quite difficult to catch when they're on the softer bottom. So if they did want to be there out of the wind, they were going to be hard to catch. And then the shallow water was full of trouble, full of reeds, full of snags and stick ups. So I spent a long time plumbing up just to find an area where I could fish. Taking some advice from what I'd seen last week really, I set up 2 kits with 16 hollow in. 16 hollow really is a strong elastic. My top kits aren't particularly long, 2 meters long, which means that, you know, the elastic in them really does strengthen up quickly. So I thought if I've got any chance of getting this fish out of the snags, I need to fish with that sort of elastic. 021 power line on all the rigs, and Dura Plus 6 floats with an inbuilt the eye built into the stem, and the stem goes right through the float. You cannot fish that sort of peg without tackle like this. Really strong, durable line, durable elastics. And one thing I do when I draw really snaggy or pegs where I think I'm going to have to give them some stick is I actually fish with eyed hooks. So I fish either PR36s in a 16 or a PR38 in a 14, because when you tie an eyed hook with, I used an 019 hook length, when you tie an eyed hook, the thick line can never pull over the spade. All you're ever going to get is that knot gripping on itself through the eye, and it's an incredibly strong setup. So that's what I had. I fished with a 414s with a bulk around about 20 centimeters from the hook, and then just that eyed hook on 019, so if I did hook up on anything, at least the hook length would break and I'd get the rig back. I don't know if you've ever tried pulling for a break on 019 power line. It's very difficult, so I wasn't fancying too much having you know, hooking up in the brambles, but it was a risk I might have to take. When the match started, I'd made a decision really that because there was a chance of catching some barbel, I wanted to feed a few casters. I think casters are a fantastic bait for barbel. Pellets, they also eat pellets, but I had heard that, you know, there was a chance that there'd be a few carp and F1s in the area, so pellets as well. So I went for a mix. Now those of you that know me know I like to try and measure the bait that I use, so I know what I'm using in certain quantities. So I did 250 millicasters, 250 ml of pellets and 150 ml of corn, and I mix those into a tub, and that would be my initial feed. I try and then gauge what I was catching on. So had corn been a better bait on the hook, had casters been a better bait on the hook, had pellet been a better bait on the hook, I probably would have upped the amount of that particular bait. And as you can see from what I'm feeding there, the thing is with doing that is that next time I know if I want to just put 150 ml of casters rather than 250 ml, I've got an easy way of measuring my bait. It takes 2 seconds to do, and it keeps you in control of what you're doing. So that was one thing that I did. So when I started the match, I went in with this bait and I tapped it out on the plateau, very expectant of a barbel straight away. 10 minutes passed and I didn't have a fish, and then all of a sudden I caught a skimmer about a pound. Then I caught another one about a pound and a half. On I think a pellet I started on, so I changed the caster, double caster, and I caught an F1, still no barbel. Half an hour had gone by and I only had 3 fish in the net. I thought, really, this is nowhere near good enough. I need to search around a little bit, probably 25 minutes. I need to search around a bit more. I've still fancied the deeper water, but I thought, no, I'll go into that shallower water, just see if the barbel are there. I started in the shallower water, straight away, 2 barbel, £2 each. Great start. I thought, oh, fantastic, I found them. And then a carp, around about £3 a mirror. And for the next hour, I never had another barbel, but either a big F1, but mainly mirrors and commons. On this shallow water I caught. I had a real wrestling match. I think I lost 2 or 3 in the reeds, but I got the majority out. Probably 15 or 16 fish for the best part of £45. A fantastic hour. Really, really put me in a strong position. Then all of a sudden, it was like turning the light off. That shallow water was absolutely dead. I couldn't catch in that shallow water at all. So I thought, well, you know, what am I going to do here? I need to look to another place, another area of the swim to try and find some fish. I went into the deep water and I just couldn't catch there. I had a few liners, then I caught a barbel, then I foul hooked a couple of barbel. I was waiting ages for bites and I thought, no, I'm not going to win the match fishing for barbel. Even though it's a so-called barbel peg, and that's what they've been catching to win the matches, that the cold easterly wind right in my face had obviously totally wiped the barbel out. So I went back to the shallow water and it was hard. I could tell it was hard. Double caster had been a really good bait because I was catching odd F1s and odd eyed as well mixed in, and I thought, I think really because it's looking like a harder day, I could see John Wink up across the lake, who is probably one of the best shallow water anglers I've ever come across, and he goes to decoy all the time. He was on a good peg for shallow and it wasn't really happening for him, and I could tell that was a great indication for me that the lake was fishing hard. If there is good anglers dotted around, and there was good anglers everywhere, but I always try and I can't spend all my time looking at other anglers. I noticed John across there. He's a great guy and he's a great angler, and I thought, keep an eye on him, and that way I'll know how the lake's fishing. And because he wasn't bagging up, I thought, right, I think I'm going to up the amount of casters slightly and just try and catch a little bit more of everything. So I upped the amount of casters on the next feed. I think I put 300 ml of casters, 150 ml of pellets and 150 ml of corn. And I started in that shallow water and it was slow. They really still weren't there, but all of a sudden they came back and it was F1s. And the last hour and a half I've caught decent F1s, up to £3, double caster with a strong tackle. It was made more difficult. I actually lost one entire set of gear, so there was some of my elastic in the peg, made it very tricky. But by pulling the fish away and really bossing the peg, I kept catching. I had a really good last 30 minutes, and like I said, I probably lost 10 fish throughout the day, but I've had, I don't know, something like 45 fish at least, I would say. So, you know, I was really happy with that, bearing in mind the peg I was on. And I'd used my clicker again, the old clicker. It's not proven very reliable, to be honest. I'd click £40 in the, it's a strict £50 in a net limit. If you go over, you get knocked back to £50. If you go over £60, you're disqualified. So I worked to £40. I thought, if I get £40 in a net and I'm slightly over, then I'm not going to lose any weight. So the first net I thought I had £40, weighed 48.15. So I was really happy that there was more in there than I thought, but obviously that was quite close to being a £50. The next net, £50 11 ounces, so I actually had to have 11 ounces deducted, which I was absolutely gutted about. I had a third net ready, So I was ever so disappointed that I'd gone over in there, but I thought there was £40. I didn't want to sort of waste any more nets. And then in the final net, I thought I had £28 and it was 35. So obviously, again, those F1s have caught me out. They really are. You think it's £2, it's probably more like 2.5. They are a crucial fish in building a weight for a match. And that gave me a final weight on the board of £134 6 ounces, which in 5 hours at Decoy, usually not enough to win the match, but the conditions have been terrible. So I was actually quite excited. I thought, well, I thought I had more like 110. So I'm absolutely delighted that I've had that weight. Let's see what happens. And when we got back, there'd been £131 I heard. They didn't read the weight out, but I was told £131 on Oak. A really good performance there by Lee, and he's caught shallow on pellets. He's just been a little bit unlucky because unfortunately I've caught a couple of more fish, but fortunately for me, that has booked my place in the Maver Match this final. £50,000 to the winner of that event. I've qualified the first year it happened. I'm absolutely delighted to qualify again. To win big matches and to qualify for big events is part of what I'm all about in fishing. I love my team fishing, and I love the fact I get to go away with Barnsley in England. That's a fantastic privilege, but alongside that, it's nice to do a few individual events to keep your hand in, and I'm really delighted that I've qualified for the final in August. That sort of left me a bit free now. I had a few other qualifiers. I couldn't do that many this year, so I really am delighted. What a strong final it's already looking like. Likes of Darren Cox and Andy Oldham already in the final. So I'll be absolutely delighted to line up with them and hopefully win it. So, I'm certainly not going there to come second, but you know what these events are like. Some pegs dominate on the day, and you can't win it from every peg. Certainly not. And it was certainly the case at the qualifier. I've drawn a good peg, and I really did feel that I'd sort of worked the peg hard to get the result that I wanted. So I was really pleased. That's this week's blog. Next week I've got a couple of matches at Lindome. Nothing really special. I like going to Lindome. I haven't got any qualifiers or tickets for anything, so we'll do a blog there and see how things are fishing, so you can keep on top of baits and everything else like that. Thanks for watching. Catch you next week.